Chapter 2. Shit, Michael Corvin thought as he dashed for the metro entrance, holding his hands above his head in a futile effort to keep from being soaked entirely by the nocturnal deluge. The young American kicked himself mentally for forgetting his umbrella back in his tiny apartment. Just my luck, we had to get the storm of the century, he thought, shaking his head in a good-natured bemusement. His light brown hair was plastered to his scalp, and a trickle of cold rainwater leaked beneath the collar of his nylon windbreaker, to send an ice-cold shiver down the entire length of his spine. The night's already off to a bad start, and I haven't even made it to work yet. He glanced at his, thank God, waterproof wristwatch. If he hurried, he could still make it to the hospital in time for his 9 o'clock shift, assuming the subways were running on schedule. Then he would only have to survive the 9+ hour shift to the ER before venturing out into the open again. Probably still be rain then, too, he figured. A gibbous moon peeked through the messed black storm clouds overhead. Michael grimaced at the sight of the moon, and he thought of the long hours ahead. He wasn't looking forward to tonight's shift. The casualty ward always got crazier as the full moon approached, and the swollen yellow disk in the sky was only a sliver away from being full. Times like this, he couldn't help wondering if moving to Hungary had been such a good idea. His sneakers overflowing with water, he sloshed over to the steps leading to the subway station. Bejaret read the metal sign posted above the stairs. Much to Michael's relief, entrance and exit, Kijirat, were two of the first words he had learned upon arriving in Budapest months ago, along with the Hungarian equivalent of "Do you speak English?" Beziaugul, and "I don't understand," Nementem. He was thankful his Hungarian had improved since then to his own frustration. The concrete archway at the bottom of the steps was clogged by a swarm of dumb Hungarians fumbling with their umbrellas, which forced him to spend several more seconds in the pouring rain. By the time he finally reached the shelter of the station itself, he looked and felt like a drowned rat. Oh well, he thought, trying to maintain a sense of humour about the whole situation. If he wanted to be dry all the time, I should have looked for Red Sea and Sahara. Although Budapest had boasted the first underground metro system on the continent, constructed in 1894, the Blue Emperor line had been in operation since the 1970s. As a result of the Fenerick Square station was a sleek and modern looking with spotless tile floors, pristine graffiti-free walls. Michael fished a pale blue ticket, good for 30 days, out of his pocket, and franked it in the machine. In front of the nearest turnstile, a puddle formed beneath him as gravity did its best to dry him. Sopping wet, he slicked his hair back and rode an escalator down to the platform, which was jammed with milling commuters. A good sign, he realized. The large crowd meant that he hadn't fully missed on at the uptown train. Idly scanning the soggy assemblage, he caught his breath in his throat as his gaze fell on an amazing-looking woman standing on the platform below, leaning back against a kiosk. A startling and spectacular vision, she was clad in glistening black leather from her neck down to her knee-high boots. A long black trench coat belted at her waist failed to conceal her lithe, athletic figure, while her porcelain features bore a timeless beauty and glamour. A jagged crop of dark brown hair gave her a sexy electricity that made Michael's pulse speed up. She looked out of place, amidst the other everyday hustle and bustle of the metro station. An exotic apparition, wild, mysterious, and enticing. Everything I'm not, he thought, warily. Although riveted by this astonishing eyeful, he was unable to look away, even when she raised her head to stare right back at him. For an endless moment, their eyes met. Michael found himself drowning in an enigmatic chestnut-coloured pools that seemed to hold unfathomable depths far beyond his ability to probe or comprehend. The mystery woman returned his gaze, and her eyes seeming to penetrate all the way to the back of his skull. Her frozen, neutral expression divulged little clue to what was going on behind that perfect face. Michael found himself wishing that he wasn't looking quite so bedraggled at the moment. The chestnut orbs examined him frankly, and just for a split second, Michael thought he saw a glimmer of interest, mixed with perhaps a trace of ineffable sorrow and regret. Then, to both his relief and disappointment, she looked away. choosing to glance up and down the length of the platform instead. "Who are you?" Michael wondered. Consumed by something more than curiosity, "Where did you come from? What are you looking for?" The escalator carried him downward, closer to the woman by the kiosk. Michael swallowed hard, debating whether he had the nerve to say something to her. "Excuse me, miss," he rehearsed mentally, "but I couldn't help gawking at you." Just as the moving stairs reached down the bottom, however, Michael stared to the step onto the platform. A bright blue train came roaring into the station, accompanied by a gust of cool air and deafening blast of noise. The train's sudden arrival startled Michael, momentarily shattering the spell bewitching the stranger had cast over him. And when he turned to look again for the lady in question, he discovered that she had vanished from sight completely. "Damn," he muttered under his breath. The subway doors hissed open, and the impatient commuters surged towards the waiting room. Michael expended a few more seconds searching for the glimpse of the leather-clad enchantress, then, reluctantly, headed for the train as well. Probably just as well, he thought. Utterly failing to convince himself, an amplified voice spoke over the station's loudspeakers, instructing the people on the platform to step aside and let the arriving passengers exit the train. "I'm running late for work as it is." Hidden in the shadows beneath the escalator, Celine watched the wide-eyed American youth turn towards the sleek blue train. For the second time in less than 10 minutes, she chastised herself for letting the nameless human's striking good looks divert her from her mission. Still, she had to admit that her undead heart had skipped a beat when she saw him coming down the escalator, even as her fascinated gaze had lingered on his chiseled countenance much longer than it should have. "I must be getting feeble-minded and girlish in my old age," she thought, archly unable to shake the memory of the American's pale brown eyes. Raisin Trix came down the escalator a few moments after the unlikely object of her intention. The odious sight and smell of the lycanthropes brought her back to business. She watched intently as the uncouth pair joined the horde descending on the newly arrived train. Farther down the platform, artfully concealed amidst the station's murkier nooks and crannies, Rigel assiduously kept his eyes on the Lycans as well. He and Celine exchanged a glance, then simultaneously slipped from their hiding place to trail after their detestable quarry. Celine was grateful for the backup when the two Lycans split up, spreading out through the advancing throng like timber wolves converging on the unsuspecting deer. She signaled Rigel to take Raze, who was heading roughly into the other vampire's direction, while she stayed close to Trix. Nathaniel, she knew, was still above ground, keeping watch over the station's entrance just in case any Lycan reinforcements showed up unexpectedly. So far so good, she thought. Maintaining a discreet distance from both Lycans, the motion of the crowd carried them towards the open doors of the subway train, and Celine wondered curiously where the clueless Lycans were leading them. Perhaps all the way to the creature's latest lair? She glanced over at Raze, who was standing outside the train, about midway down the platform. To her concern, he suddenly halted in his tracks, and sniffed the pungent air of the station. Hell, she thought, instantly on guard. I don't like the looks of this. Her hands crept towards the matching berettas hidden under her trench coat. Even as Raze spun around suddenly, catching a glimpse of Rigel, panic flooded his dark, mahogany face, and he reached beneath his own jacket and whipped out a modified Uzi. "Bloods!" he shouted in a deep, basso profundo voice. Gunfire erupted from the muzzle of his submachine gun, turning the crowded metro platform into a scene of utter panic. The Uzi's harsh report echoed cacophonously within the subterranean confines of the subway station, all but drowning out the frightened shrieks of terrified humans commuters. Frantic men and women hit the deck or else stampeded for the nearest exit. Celine and Rigel dived for the cover, taking refuge behind adjacent concrete support columns, as they swiftly drew out their own firearms. Rigel was equipped with an MP5 submachine gun, while Celine relied on her trusty Berettas. Ignoring the fear-crazed humans, Raze swept the platform with a blistering hail of automatic weapons fire. Peering out from behind the concrete column, as the relentless fuselage chipped away at the white enamel tiles covering the support pillar, Celine observed that the Lycan's chattering Uzi was firing a type of ammo she had never encountered before. The cascading bullets literally glowed with their own built-in illumination, shining so brightly it actually hurt her eyes to look at them. What in the Elder's name? She thought in confusion. Her fingers squeezed the triggers of Berettas, returning the Lycan's fire with a barrage of silver bullets. Nathaniel paced back and forth in front of the metro's entrance, beneath the protective awning of the Bristow access street from the station. They also serve who only stand and wait, he mused, recalling the immortal words of Milton. Nathaniel had met the great poet once in London in 1645, while tracking down a band of renegade Lycans amidst the chaos and bloodshed of the English Civil War. A shame that we never tried to make him immortal. The leather-clad vampire maintained a lookout over the streets and sidewalks surrounding the station, lest his comrades be surprised by another pack of Lycans on the prowl. It distressed Nathaniel that Celine and Rigel most likely would have to follow the two Lycans onto a departing train, leaving him behind. But he trusted his fellow death dealers to contact him once they reached their destination. If the fates were kind, Nathaniel would not miss out of all of the action. The unmistakable clatter of gunfire upset the night. Coming from the subway tunnels below the square, Nathaniel sprang into action, racing across the street towards the entrance to the station. Horns honked angrily behind him as he took the stairs several stops at a time. Terrified commuters fleeing the alarming din on the unleashed firearms came rushing up the steps, impeding his progress. But the impassioned vampire tossed the frightened men and women aside like ragdolls. "Hold on!" he thought urgently as he landed deftly upon the mud-tracked floor of the subway. He was only too aware that Celine and Rigel faced an equal number of bloodthirsty Lycans. A Walther P888 pistol in each hand, he tore down the tunnel towards the turnstile, anxious to lend the other death dealers a much-needed numerical advantage. The continuing blare of gunfire added fuel to his haste. It sounded as though his embattled comrades were holding their own, but for how much longer? The soles of his boots smacked loudly against the tiled floor. Traumatized humans, pale-faced and gasping, threw themselves against the tunnel walls to avoid the gun-wielding, black-clad figure, rushing insanely towards the clamouring den of underground combat. Nathaniel paid no attention to the agitated mortals, intent on rejoining Celine and Rigel. "Stand fast," he silently entreated them. "I'm on my way." The incandescent rounds ricocheted wildly about the underground platform. Glowing bullets took out many of the overhead lights, which exploded by pyrotechnic amusements, showering sparks onto the cement floor below. The remaining lights flickered fitfully, casting creeping shadows over the besieged station. What the hell? Michael thought, suddenly finding himself stuck in the middle of the full-scale firefight, along with several other fearful bystanders. He huddled behind an automated ticketing kiosk, while the echoing explosions pounded against his eardrums, overpowering even the strident screams of the hysterical commuters. The acrid smell of crowdite assailed his nostrils. He couldn't believe what was happening. 1 minute he was trudging towards the waiting subway, still half looking for the breathtaking woman in black leather, when unknown parties abruptly started shooting up the crowded platform. Doing his best to keep his head down, Michael couldn't get a good look at who was doing the shooting, but his overwrought brain desperately tried to make sense of the situation. Some kind of Russian mob thing? He speculated. Downtown Pest wasn't exactly Hell's Kitchen, but organized crime had been thriving in the former Warsaw Pact nations ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Maybe this was a turf war between rival mobsters. A teenage girl, maybe 17 years old, made a break for the up escalator. She almost made it, before getting caught in the vicious crossfire. High-powered blasts tore into her upper leg, like a brightly painted marionette whose strings had just been slashed by a razor. Blood spurted from beneath her miniskirt as she stared in shock at her proliferated leg. From the bright red colour of the blood, Michael knew that these bullets had opened her femoral artery. He couldn't hear her gasping over the roar of the gunfire, but he saw her chest heaving erratically as all the colour drained from her face. Screw it, Michael thought. With no other choice, he bit down on his lip and darted out from behind the ticketing machines. Crouching as low as he could, he scurried through the line of gunfire like an army field medic. Bizarrely, glowing bullets whizzed past his head, creating dancing blue spots at the periphery of his vision, but he kept on going until he reached the wounded teen. who was lying sprawled out on the platform in a swiftly spreading puddle of her own blood. He dropped to his knees beside her and began feverishly applying pressure to the injured limb. Hot blood soaked through the knees of his pants, dispelled some of the chill left behind by the autumnal weather outside. Adrenaline coursed through his veins, giving him the energy he needed to help the girl. "You're going to be all right," he assured her, raising his voice to be heard over the reverberating screams and gunfire. He struggled to make eye contact with the girl, even as he kept pressing down on the wound with both hands. Sticky arterial blood seeped between his fingers. To his dismay, the teen's violet eyes were already glazed and unfocused. Her face was pale, with a slight bluish tint, and her skin felt cool and clammy. "I'm losing her," he realized, recognizing the telltale symptoms of hypervolemic shock. And, No, he blurted at her. "Don't close your eyes. Stay with me now." Her eyelids drooped alarmingly, and he thrust his face at hers. "Stay with—" Another burst of automatic weapons fire rocketed the platform, interrupting Michael's desperate attempt to rouse the half-conscious girl. Heavily mascaraed eyelashes fluttered weakly, then snapped awake at a booming sound of the guns. "That's it," Michael thought, shielding the girl's ashen face with his own body. Every fresh blast made him cringe, expecting to feel the bullets slam into him at any minute. Was it just his imagination, or had he actually succeeded in slowing the girl's rapid blood loss? For a split second, he was mentally transported back to the lonely roadside in New Haven, watching another young woman slowly die right before his eyes. Not again, he thought, feeling a familiar pain stab him sharply in the eyes. "Hang in there," he urged, the Hungarian girl forcing the thought of the other woman out of his mind. "I'm not going to let you die, even if it kills me."